Hello, welcome to this first ever episode, the inaugural, the pilot, the premiere episode of my podcast, The Padded Room. My name's Ali. I decided to make a podcast because I got sick and tired of talking to the people I know in real life about the things I'm interested in, and I decided to bother people on the internet. This first episode is my intensive spoiler filled recap review of Doctor Strange. I'm going to go through the whole movie, discuss the characters, the visuals, what worked, what didn't work, what does this movie mean for the Marvel Universe at large, and yeah, all sort of cool stuff like that. So hold on to your wigs and keys. Let's begin the show. So, Doctor Strange, I've seen it twice now, once in 2D, once in IMAX 3D. How do I feel about this movie? I would give it a good fun watch. A 7. But 7's not so good. Why a 7? Why not an 8? Why not even a 9? Well, a 9, I don't think it's easy for a Marvel movie to get into 9 sort of levels, but 7 is decent. It's decent, but it was decently acted, decently. Some story elements were good, but primarily my gripe with the movie is the story is nothing unique. It's a similar sort of origin story we've seen many times before, and as always, Marvel has some recurring problems. So the story, let's get to the story. Now the story is of this man who is an arrogant, very well-educated person. And this well-educated person is sort of an asshole. He's kind of an asshole, but he's a lovable sort of asshole. People like him. And he's very successful in what he does. And then as a part of his work, or as part of the travels his work entails, he ends up having this accident sort of situation. He ends up in a traumatic, tragic incident which severely affects his physical form. And then he ends up in some sort of mountain cave sort of location in the world. And he has to find himself, he has to center himself, and then he has to put his skills, his existing skills, to some use. And at the end of this ordeal, he comes out this superhero. Now, I am talking about Doctor Strange, but I could be talking about Iron Man 1. Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, both very clever people, both at the top of their game, and then both end up in accidents. Doctor Strange's Lamborghini flies off a cliff, don't text and drive. Iron Man, Tony Stark, is in Afghanistan, and then he is attacked by Urdu-speaking Afghani Taliban. He is injured, he has shrapnel in his heart. Doctor Strange loses function in his hands. He is this amazing, super talented neurosurgeon, and obviously very, very stable hands is a prerequisite, I guess. I'm not a doctor, I guess it would be, it makes sense. And his hands are now fucked. He cannot use them, they keep shaking, they're not stable, so obviously he can't do any surgery. He goes nearly bankrupt, trying new procedure after procedure, trying to fix his hands, but nothing works. So he ends up going to the east, to Nepal. In Kathmandu, there is a place called Kamartaj, where Doctor Strange is recommended from this person to another person, by Benjamin Bratt, who is also in this movie. Maybe he has like 2 minutes of screen time. I remember once upon a time, Benjamin Bratt was a decent personality. I mean, he was sort of famous. He was up and coming, right? He used to be in movies, or was I imagining that? So anyway, he ends up there. There he meets this group of magical people, not unlike Tony Stark in a cave, where he meets this Syrian doctor, if I remember correctly. And then sort of differences. Tony Stark is alone. Doctor Strange is in this magical institute. After some persuasion, they teach him how to harness the energy of other dimensions through incantations called spells. Obviously, they try to sort of bring magic and spells into the scientific world to make it easy for people to understand. and all of that. And at the end of that, Tony Stark becomes Iron Man. Doctor Strange becomes the sorcerer, not the sorcerer supreme, but the sorcerer that he needs to be to fight his foes. His foes who, like in Iron Man 1, I think it was Warmonger was his name. He worked in Stark Industries. He was a friend of his. He was in the same industry. Then he is disillusioned. For whatever reason, he starts selling arms on the black market or to terrorists or whatever. And now he's Tony Stark's villain. Similarly, Mads Mikkelsen is a member of this same order, and his name is Caecilius, and he is disillusioned with whatever teachings they're peddling in this Institute of Magic, and he goes about his own way, and he goes to the dark side, I guess, and he wants to contact some extra dimensional entities and take their power and destroy the world and whatever. But yeah, two graduates of the same school end up fighting. This is closer to the Doctor Strange canon origin story. It's similar. He was a surgeon. Stephen Strange was a surgeon in the comics, and then he does get into an accident which injures his hands, and he cannot be a surgeon anymore. But he does end up going to the magical institute to get his bachelor's in sorcery, and they couldn't really shy too far away from it. But unfortunately, the side effect is that it all feels a bit familiar. Now, how was Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange? Because everyone wanted him to be Doctor Strange from the start. Even Marvel apparently wanted him to be Doctor Strange from the start, so much so that the movie was originally supposed to be released in June of this year, but instead they pushed the release back to fit into his schedule, and they moved it to November, which is when it actually came out. So there was a lot of accommodation because Marvel clearly wanted this person. Benedict Cumberbatch, he did okay. He was fine. I think his performance, he's Sherlock. I mean, he can be the intelligent asshole. And he did that really well. There were some awkward elements at humor throughout the movie, which I felt did not really work. But overall, Benedict Cumberbatch did okay. Let's see how he does in upcoming movies. Will there be a sequel to Doctor Strange? Not so sure at this moment, but I think Doctor Strange will return in at least other Marvel movies. Rachel McAdams. Rachel McAdams is also in this movie. Now, she is an accomplished actress. I think she's been up for several awards over her career, but another issue that Marvel movies have had is the main female lead, which is sort of what she was. Tilda Swinton was not the main romantic interest situation. It was Rachel McAdams. And Rachel McAdams is just a woman. She's very accomplished. She's a surgeon also in the ER. And her and Doctor Strange have had a romantic history. But apart from that, she's not really doing anything. She has no contribution to the story apart from one scene where she helps save Doctor Strange's life, and everything she does in the movie revolves around Doctor Strange. Nothing of her own. I think the term is that she has no agency. Very similar to Natalie Portman in Thor 1, at least. I don't even remember what Natalie Portman was doing in Thor 2. So Doctor Strange has an accident, blah, 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 cynical, horrible, throwing papers around, product placement of the Microsoft Surface, and then he ends up in Kamar-Taj. Now, he's in Kamar-Taj, he's learning, apparently, how to do magic. Is this similar a methodology as a Shaolin temple? Initially, when he goes there, he's a huge skeptic, and then Tilda Swinton. I really liked Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One. Now, there was also another controversy here where Tilda Swinton was told, was revealed to be the Ancient One. Now, the Ancient One in the comics is this really old Asian guy. And by Asian, I mean like Chinese or something. And people were like, oh, whitewashing, and what is this? And, why are you doing this? Which is true. You could have cast an Asian American or an Asian whoever in that role, but she did well. It was interesting that they made her a woman, firstly, and she's Celtic as per the movie. And Tilda Swinton is weird enough in reality and as her own person that she pulled off the role. It didn't seem jarring that this person should be this. And also, the Asian American characters at the start of many of Marvel movies, including maybe Iron Fist, Marvel Comics, Iron Fist, Doctor Strange, all these are also very stereotypical Orientalist characters. Like, Pai Mei. What was his name in Kill Bill, the kung fu teacher? Now these are in the 60s and 70s. You had these stereotypes of old Asian people with the Fu Manchu and just cackling away and speaking weird Chinese. So in a way, this is also a negation of that stereotype. And, I guess that's as far as it would be. And also, there's the issue of the Ancient One initially, I think, being Tibetan, or maybe Doctor Strange's University of Magic being in Tibet. I think there was some of an issue with that. And that would be a problem because China is a huge market for these movies. So you don't want to put someone positive or one of the good guys in Tibet, a place that China has huge issues with, and possibly end up with not having a Chinese release, and then that affects your market a lot because a lot of these movies make a lot of money in countries outside of the US, especially China. So it was a decision, and I don't think they were ever going to have an Ancient One being from Asia. Apart from that, Tilda Swinton, she did really well, and her personality is weird and ethereal enough that she fits. She fits into the role of the Asian One, and there's that awkward humor, there's the cynical British sarcasm going through some scenarios, and that's fine, and it works, it's great. Chiwetel Ejiofor, if that's how you say his name, and a person who I have not seen in any movies. He's been very famous. I haven't seen 12 Years a Slave. I haven't seen most acclaimed movies. He's good. He is Mordo. Now, I was aware that Mordo is maybe Baron Mordo, a villain, a famous Doctor Strange villain. And now we have Chiwetel Ejiofor, also in the Institute of Magical Studies, Nepal, and he's a nice guy. He's cracking jokes. He's training Doctor Strange. He's being protective of the Ancient One. What's going on? Well, we do find that out later. During the movie, they sort of try and introduce us to the fact that this guy has had a dark past, and he is sort of rigid in his beliefs, and he's a stickler for the rules, and he doesn't want things to be messed around with, and people should stay in their space and not mess with the natural order of things, because that's what the magicians and the sorcerers do. They protect the natural order. They don't mess with it. That's interesting, and it's character development, not for this movie, but more for future roles. Then the final major character, apart from the villain, is Wong. Wong is the librarian of this university, and I keep calling it a university. It's not. It's just like, I don't even know what you would call it. It's in a house, and they're doing magic inside, and they're teaching. He's an Asian character. Obviously, his actual name is Benedict Wong, I believe, and his name in the movie is also Wong, the monosyllabic name. And then there's awkward humor when Doctor Strange meets him for the first time. He's like, "Hi, what's your name?" And he's like, "Wong." Librarian, he's like, "Oh, Wong, that's it, no surname." And then he goes into this awkward series of jokes, which felt particularly weird. He's like, "Oh, Wong, that's it, no surname, like Adele, Beyonce, Eminem." Like, awkward, hitting your face. But there was only once. And no, there's another scene where Wong is listening to Beyonce, and it's supposed to be funny, and it's sort of not, but fine. He's just this Asian guy who's supposed to be stoic and serious. That's about it. He doesn't have much of a role, and there's some sort of exposition that comes through his explaining things to Doctor Strange. Finally, the villain of the piece. The villain is Mads Mikkelsen. Now, Mads Mikkelsen is an esteemed actor. He's the same person who was Hannibal in the TV show that was really, really popular and very critically acclaimed. Unfortunately, cancelled. He's been, I think, the villain in Casino Royale too, the guy whose eyes kept bleeding. So he's nice. But in the movie, he really has no role. The whole environment of the movie is like is catering to people who are maybe familiar already with the Marvel universe. And you're just thrown into things. I mean, I don't really know why Caecilius broke ranks. He was a master at this institute as well, and now he's just pissed off, and he's running around, and he's trying to contact Dormammu, this other main big bad, who is in the dark dimension, and he's killing the previous librarian and trying to kill the Ancient One and destroying these sanctums. Why is he doing this? And he was just angry and dissatisfied, and that's it. Please believe all of this. Performance wise, he's fine. This is an issue with Marvel in general, like Malekith in Thor 2 and Zemo in Civil War. No one cares about the villain. They're still under the Loki complex. No villain has been as charismatic and effective, or maybe that's just the acting of what is his name? I don't even remember. Loki. Whoever played Loki, I forget his name. Wow. He was the only notable villain in Marvel to date, and this problem continues even now. He has his henchmen, he's running around, his eyes look weird because he's tapping into the dark dimension. His scheme, by the way, is that he is going to tap into the dark dimension where time does not exist. Earth will become part of the dark dimension because the dark dimension is ruled by this cosmic entity called Dormammu, whose entire purpose is that he finds worlds and he adds them to his paper chain of planets in his dimension, and then he just rules over them. I don't know why he does this, but he maybe it's like a Galactus sort of thing. He eats them. But when you go into that dimension, you're going to be immortal because time does not exist, and that's what he's looking for, and he has a lot of power. So if you try and work for him, he's going to expand your magical skill set. Now, the sorcerers of Earth, their purpose is to protect Earth against magical threats, specifically including Dormammu. And they have these 3 sanctums which cast this protective spell around the Earth. These sanctums are obviously in New York, obviously in London, and not so obviously in Hong Kong. I would have expected Tokyo or something. But again, maybe you don't want to piss off China. So you have these sanctums, and they cast a spell around the Earth, and they protect it. And then what Caecilius is doing is, one, he's tapping into the dark dimension and becoming more powerful thanks to Dormammu, giving him a lifeline. And then he's going about destroying the sanctum. So they destroy the London sanctum. They try to destroy the New York sanctum, and then they do, but then they don't destroy the Hong Kong sanctum. More about that later. So that's happening. That rounds up the characters of the movie. Now, story progression wise, when Doctor Strange initially gets visuals, when he initially gets to the Institute of Magic, Kamartaj, he is skeptical, like all people should be skeptical. Who, if you've never heard of magic, you'd be weird to go like, yeah, that sounds like I've never heard of this before, but it makes sense. So like everyone else, he is also skeptical. And then there's this crazy, trippy sequence where Tilda Swinton punches his astral form, or maybe that's his spirit. I don't know what the tie-up is, but she punches that out of his body. And when she does that, he's looking around and he sees his body and it's like, what the hell is going on? And then she pulls it back in, and then he's like, blah, 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 I don't believe it. How did you do this? What was in the tea? Haha, jokes. And then she's like, no, open your eye. She places her thumb on his forehead where the third eye is supposed to be. And then she casts him through this interdimensional trip down the rabbit hole. And that is visually insane. I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen in a movie. But then I thought about it. And while it was very crazy and it was the craziest thing you've ever seen in a Marvel movie, it is not the craziest thing maybe you've seen ever, because the visual effects of this movie are very, very similar to other movies. Namely, there's a lot of matter and time and space moving around in the real world. You know that is very similar to Inception. In Inception, it was not happening to such a great degree. It was in a dream of a normal person. Now, this is the real world being affected by magic and people who are sorcerers. So it's obviously much, much more complicated. In the sequence where Doctor Strange is traveling through the dimensions on his first arrival at Kamartaj, there is the similar visual effect of time and space stretching out and then springing back together. That was very similar to Interstellar. I mean, 2 Nolan movies inspiring all of Marvel, that's fine. Christopher Nolan is just that good. There are also original aspects. I really liked where his form was split into 8 or 9 different forms, and then they all clash back together, and he's falling through these things, and then he enters this weird world, and there's this face over there, and then he's brought back, and blah, blah, blah. Obviously, Doctor Strange is very good at what he does. He has an eidetic memory, I believe it's called, so it's a photographic memory, as they say. He speeds through his learning, he speeds through his study of magic, and he gets very good. He overcomes his obsession with his hands being shaky. Everything's good. Fast forward to now, Stephen Strange is an accomplished magician or sorcerer, and Caecilius is attacking the various sanctums. Through a series of circumstances, he ends up in the New York sanctum, and there's this interesting fight scene. Now, the fight scene is interesting in the sense that it's martial arts and there's a bit of magic here and there, but that scenario is more interesting because it introduces one of probably the most interesting Marvel characters in a long time. That Marvel character is the Cloak of Levitation. Doctor Strange's red, flowy cape situation is an actual character. The cloak seems to be self-aware. It's moving around. It protects Doctor Strange by pulling him away from threats and even by actually fighting with people, fighting with the bunch of nameless henchmen of Caecilius. One of them who is Scott Adkins. Shout out to Scott Adkins, Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe. And it's very interesting. It has a life of its own, a personality, a fun personality. Everyone is making this one connection that the cloak is exactly like Aladdin's magic carpet in the Disney movies. So it's great. It's amazing. Standout part of the movie. Overall, costume design also in the movie, speaking of the cloak, is interesting. I mean, like I mentioned before, it seems like regular Kung Fu, Shaolin kind of situations. It's done well. They're decent colors. It's not muted, which is a complaint people often have from DC. Marvel's never been accused of that. The tone of the movie, visually, color-wise, in all Marvel movies is pretty similar. It might get boring for some, but it's also uniform, so you feel like everything is even visually in the same universe. That's all good. Then in the New York sanctum, where after he discovers the cloak, there is an interesting fight scene where Doctor Strange is hurt, and then he creates a portal, and he goes to the hospital where he used to work, and he has Rachel McAdams work on him. I don't even remember her name, Dr. Palmer, and she's trying to save his life, and he's guiding her. He has learned to separate his astral form from his body, and he makes it visible to her, and she has a small panic attack. It was weird how easily she accepted the whole magical thing with just one or two damsel in distress-ish shrieks here and there. The scene where Doctor Strange is guiding her in his surgery is apparently a direct reference to one of the comics. It was done okay. There was an astral form in that scenario. There was an astral form fight with Scott Adkins' astral form. His actual form is back in the New York sanctum, wrapped by the cloak. He is here, and he's fighting Doctor Strange in the astral world, and then Doctor Strange eventually defeats him through hilarious circumstances, maybe. Then Doctor Strange goes back to the Institute. Now the Institute is damaged, and then there's a big fight going on. Soon after Doctor Strange is on the surgery table, Mordo has arrived, and he's like, what's going on? And okay, you're alive. And then they attack the New York Sanctum again, and then they're running to New York, and then Caecilius and his henchmen are just about to finish off Strange and Mordo, when, lo and behold, the Ancient One shows up. There's a plot twist-ish about the Ancient One, which I'll leave out of this. It's interesting, but it's not huge. It's just a part of why Mordo has his eventual descent into darkness and disillusionment. But the Ancient One shows up, there's a lot of fighting, and the Ancient One is apparently kicking ass, and she's amazing, and she's so good, and now she's dead. Suddenly, there's a slip in her attention. Caecilius pushes a henchman towards her. She's entangled with the henchman, and then Caecilius stabs henchman and the Ancient One. I thought she would be better than this, but she's dead. There's a scene where she is dying, and then she's in her astral form, and then she's explaining the potential in Doctor Strange to Strange, who is also in his astral form, trying to convince her to go back to her body so the doctor, the surgeons and stuff back at the hospital again can save her life. That doesn't work. She dies. Obviously, she has to die so that Strange can become the Sorcerer Supreme. And then Strange goes back to the Institute, and Mordo is disillusioned and is like, oh, she betrayed us, she did this, she did that. And Strange is like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But right now, we have a problem with Caecilius, and they've attacked London, they've attacked New York twice. You know where they're going. They're going to Hong Kong. We need to go and save the world. Cue the Marvel typical big punch-up climactic fight situation. And I'm expecting it, and it's going to happen, and Caecilius shows up, and Wong is at the Hong Kong Sanctum, and there's a bunch of Chinese people there. They're all picking out weapons, and it's going to be Kung Fu extravaganza. When Strange and Mordo get there, everything's destroyed, the Dark Dimension's coming in, and like, what the shit happened? Flashback. During Strange's study, when he was being an amazing wizard at being a wizard, he found this amulet. Which had a green stone inside it. If you're familiar with the comics, you will know that this is the Eye of Agamotto. The Eye of Agamotto has apparently the power to control time, much like Windows Media Player. You can activate the spell. If you move your hand left, it will scrub forward in the timeline, move it, or backward, scrub backward in the timeline, move it right, it will scrub forward. He tries this with an apple, he tries this with a book, the pages of which Caecilius tore out at the start of the movie, and then he gets told off because you're not supposed to mess with time and space. But obviously, because the world has ended, and because we're all gonna die, it's time to pull out the time turner. Time to pull that out and let's fix everything. Doctor Strange turns it all back. Caecilius sees him trying to do this, tries to stop him, fails. Everything is going in reverse. The sanctum is rebuilt. Caecilius is obviously a magician, a sorcerer of great worth on his own. He breaks free of the spell. There's kung fu going on while everything is moving backwards. And then Caecilius somehow breaks Strange's concentration, and the spell is broken and everything is paused. Caecilius goes into this monologue. Look at that. That's a dark dimension. It looks amazing. It's huge. Dormammu's coming and you're all fucked. And then Doctor Strange is like, oh yes, outside of time. Interesting. And flies off. Enter the dark dimension. Dormammu is here. Doctor Strange is clearly going to out-magic this person. But this was one of the standout incidents of the movie, where Doctor Strange confronts Dormammu. Dormammu, what does he look like? He's a huge blobby face in the sky. Like Parallax from Green Lantern, like Galactus from Fantastic Four 2, Series A. He's just a thing in the sky. There's an eye, there's a mouth, whatever. Which is weird, because in the comics he was a person. He had a throne, he was sitting there, his head was on fire, but I guess they thought that this would be too confusing for people. You'd think that, oh, that's just what Thanos looks like. He looks like the Ghost Rider. Let's just make him a face in space for now. And Dormammu, I have come to make a bargain with you. And Dormammu's like, no, fuck off, I don't give a shit. And then he kills him. I'm like, what? And then repeat. Doctor Strange, exact same way, pops down. Dormammu, I've come to make a bargain with you. What is going on? There's a loop. Doctor Strange has activated the Eye of Agamotto in the dark dimension. He has brought time into an area where there was no time. Dormammu is now effectively his prisoner. Doctor Strange can die again and again, but it will just keep repeating, and Dormammu's not going to get anywhere. Doctor Strange strikes a bargain, does not try to outmagic Dormammu because, I mean, I know this is magic, and I know he's a sorcerer and everything, but some things should be more powerful than the hero. And Dormammu is clearly way more powerful than Doctor Strange. So he's like, what do you want? Set me free. And Doctor Strange is like, sure, I'll do that. But I need you to take your zealots, Caecilius and co., away from the Earth. And I need you to stay away from the Earth forever. Please do this, and I will release you. And Dormammu was like, fine. And then Doctor Strange pops back down to Earth. And Caecilius is like, what's going on? And then Caecilius and his followers are turned into these black husks. And they're pulled out into the portal. And the portal closes and everything is fine. Awkward joke at the end. Wong is laughing. Ha ha ha. Everything's funny. Mordo is not too happy. Mordo is like, yeah, we fixed everything by messing everything up. We broke with the natural order of things. That's not what we do. Doctor Strange saying, well, we totally just saved the world. Let's be cool. And Mordo is like, yeah, I'm really tired of this. What happens next time? Every time we mess with something like this, there is a bill. The bill comes due. I'm out. Walks away. And at the end, Doctor Strange, slow motion shot, walking up the stairs. I am now the sorcerer. And cool, pensive, end of movie. So yeah, that was pretty much what happened. Interesting bits of the movie. As you can see, many story elements were not really unique, in the sense that the origin story setup, the whole arc of the movie was pretty hero's journey. And Rachel McAdams had no real role. Everyone expected the Ancient One to die. All of that was going to happen. Caecilius was another pointless, anonymous villain played by a really big and famous actor. Dormammu was another face in the sky. But interesting moments include the depiction of magic itself, the cloak, that was a really interesting moment, and the ending. Too many Marvel movies end up with a lot of people running towards each other, doing superhero landings, lots of fights, punch to face, kick to balls, all that's happening, and the hero wins because he outfights or outmagics or out whatever's the enemy. This did not happen in Doctor Strange, and that was very, very refreshing, and it was really interesting how they did that. The Dark Dimension itself didn't really look visually that spectacular. It just looked like a microscopic view of bacteria or something to me. I'm not sure, but that's what it looked like. But overall, the visuals were great. You haven't seen anything like this in a Marvel movie before, maybe because such visuals aren't really relevant to other Marvel movies, but they were very unique. Setup was fine. The tone, the feel, the humor was, again, very Marvel, nothing new, but nothing bad. I mean, Marvel is at the point where they can just churn out movies, and they're all going to be decent. I don't think I've ever seen a Marvel movie I would say was bad. Even Thor 2, even Iron Man 2, I didn't think it was bad. It wasn't as interesting, and it had a huge amount of competition and pressure coming in from Iron Man 1, but it wasn't bad. But yeah, the soundtrack, again, there was a very interesting video by, I forget the YouTube account. I think it was Every Frame a Painting. I don't know. There's a YouTube account which put up an interesting video about Doctor Strange, and not Doctor Strange, about Marvel movies and their soundtracks. How there is no unique soundtrack in Marvel movies. There is no concept of an OST or thematic elements to the soundtrack, and you can't really remember it, which is a huge contrast to at least the DC movies currently, where Wonder Woman has this insane, slightly chichori, but also a very insane theme, which is instantly recognizable. It was there in Batman vs. Superman, it's there in all the Wonder Woman trailers, and Marvel has nothing. I mean, apart from mainstream songs that they've taken by AC/DC or whoever, I couldn't tell of any Marvel song that was a Marvel musical movement in any of the movies that I could predict. The Nolan Batman movies had crazy soundtracks. I mean, the Batman theme, the Bane theme, all of that was what it ingrained yourself into your mind. It's instantly recognizable. Marvel does not have that. But in this movie, they did have an interesting credits soundtrack. It was sort of psychedelic. It had this I don't know what the instrument was, but it was very interesting, but unfortunately only in the credits. Throughout the movie, I can't think of any musical piece or movement that caught my attention during the movie, but stay for the credits because the soundtrack is interesting, and also because there are 2 post-credit scenes. The first post-credit scene comes after the colorful credits, the one with the colors and the names and the animation, and that is Thor. Suddenly, we see Doctor Strange speaking to Thor, and there's some small talk, and then Doctor Strange is like, "Yeah, so what's up with Loki being here? He's kind of a shitty guy." And Thor's like, "Yeah, I know, but there's some family drama. We're looking for Odin." If you remember, in Thor 2, I think the movie ended with Loki getting rid of Odin, sort of in the sense that Loki was on the throne and he was impersonating Odin. But now Odin's disappeared, Odin's gone, Thor knows Odin's gone, and Loki was responsible. Where is this going, and what is this setting up? And Doctor Strange says, fine, so if you find Odin, will you all leave? Thor says yes. And Doctor Strange is like, great, allow me to help you. Is Doctor Strange going to be in Thor Ragnarok? Along with the Hulk? Along with Thor and Loki, obviously? Maybe, I don't know. And then there's another post-credits scene, and that post-credits scene comes after the next stage of credits, and that is with Benjamin Bratt. And Benjamin Bratt was a person who was paralyzed, and he went to Kamartaj also when modern medicine failed him, and he learned how to use magic. And then he employed said magic to fix his legs. And Mordo shows up where Benjamin Bratt is. And he's like, yeah, I'm getting kind of sick of all these sorcerers just messing with the natural order of things. So it's kind of shitty. And then Benjamin Bratt's like, bro, I don't know. I'm just helping myself out. This is my magic. And Mordo's like, no, there's no such thing as your magic. It's just magic. And the problem I have discovered with the world and the universe and the reality of things is too many sorcerers. And then he pulls out the magic from Benjamin Bratt, leaving him a cripple, and then he just walks away, setting up the personality that is to become Baron Mordo in future Doctor Strange films. I don't know if there are going to be any. But yeah, so where does this leave the Marvel Universe? Now, we've been introduced to the whole realm of magic. There was a name drop to the Avengers early on when Wong was explaining what the magicians and the sorcerers do. They're like, the Avengers protect people from real threats in the real world. We have a more extra dimensional or mystical responsibility, and there's key shots of New York City and the Avengers Tower very prominently shown there. And then in one of the post-credit scenes, Thor shows up. So there is that bigger universe tie-in feel that many Marvel movies have had after the few initial ones. And it's fine. It wasn't pushing the boundary of the story. You didn't feel that they were shoved in just to remind you that, there are other movies coming up and other movies are happening and to go watch our other 13 movies. But also, the Eye of Agamotto is apparently an Infinity Stone. This had been predicted by people in the past. It's the Infinity Stone, apparently the Time Gem. So Doctor Strange is definitely going to be in Avengers Infinity Wars. And he's going to tie in with the overall Thanos arc too. So, yeah, overall, the movie was okay. It was okay. There were interesting character points, and there were interesting, moments of humor. The visuals were great. But was it an amazing movie? No. A 7 out of 10 would be fine. I am definitely interested in watching more Doctor Strange. I hope they do better now that they've got the origin out of the way, and now that they have a villain set up. Finally, Chiwetel Ejiofor. This whole movie was like an introduction into his becoming a villain and a great hero who we're familiar with now. Parting words: go watch the movie. Let me know how it was, and I hope this works. I'm going to try and figure out what to do with this podcast. Maybe more movie reviews, maybe talk to some people. Shout out to Musharraf Zaidi, Fasi Zaka, whose podcast, How to Pakistan, on Patari and SoundCloud, was the final push I needed to do this on my own. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Let me know how you feel, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.